Retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke is in Lesotho for a final push in the national reforms process. This ahead of national elections set for October this year. During his meeting, a small group of Lesotho Congress for Democracy held a demonstration demanding that SADC should once again intervene in the safe return of their leader and former Prime Minister, Mr. Metsing, who is facing treason charges.
The SADC team, led by retired Deputy Justice Dikgang Moseneke, is in Lesotho. Ahead of the upcoming national elections, the team is having to put out fires that may stand in the way of the much-anticipated omnibus bill. The LCD is demanding a safe passage for the return for their leader Motheojoa Metsing, who is facing treason charges. They say these charges are trumped up and frivolous.
Well, the very same case has people that have been detained for almost 5 years now. And the case is not proceeding simply because all the time the council always have some reasons for postponement. So even if much as we know that there's no case in that, the fact of the matter is that if he goes, he's going to stay. I mean, it's high treason case. And treason cases, treason charges, actually there is no bail in Lesotho. It means he has to go to custody. And that will be there until after the elections as planned.
Mohosi says if their demands are not met, they will abstain from the reforms process.
The only demand that we have made to Ndate Moseneke and his team is that Ndate Metsing should come back now. And now means we have the 11th Amendment Bill in Parliament now, which we are supposed to support. And we have said we are ready to support it, provided that Ndate Metsing is back, which means that's our only condition that we have. If Ndate Metsing is not back, then it means we are not going to support that bill. And that bill, it has some clauses that demands two-thirds majority, which means SLCD. We have a significant number.
And to some newcomers in the game, they just want to get on with business.
As RFP, as newcomers, we have been looking forward to the passing of the bill. And it is our hope that it will be passed before the elections, because we believe that if it is passed, then we'll have better Lesotho, better sustainable country. I really think that our wish is to see the bill being passed.
Retired Justice Moseneke is scheduled to meet more political parties in Parliament as a last push to get the omnibus bill enacted into law, hopefully before the upcoming national elections. Rapelang Khatebe, SABC News, Lesotho.
All right, so still on the Lesotho reforms, the former Chief Justice had a few things to say.
The members of LCD, Lesotho Congress for Democracy, stormed into the SADC facilitation team venue to deliver a petition that set out their demands.
SADC signed an agreement with the government of Lesotho and opposition parties that Honorable Metsing should, among others, be free from prosecution until we complete the reforms processes and the security and judiciary systems of Lesotho are reformed. The government of Lesotho failed to honor the agreement, and SADC took no apparent measures to rectify or reprimand the government. To date, all other political parties and their leaders freely roam around the country campaigning for the elections while LCD leader is still in exile. How then would we consider the upcoming elections free and fair? We humbly plead with your excellent office to maintain consistency in the matter and hold the government to account for dishonoring the agreement deliberately. We also request your humble office to facilitate Honorable Metsing's safe return to his home and his rights be restored as a citizen of Lesotho so as to participate in the upcoming elections and national reforms.
Justice Dikgang Moseneke outlined what dominated the discussions of the day.
We were
making preparations for a declaration and a pledge by all political parties in Parliament, both in the ruling alliance as well as in the opposition, to fast track, to work together in order to facilitate the passage of reforms. And as you know, that we are now left with about 8 weeks before Parliament is dissolved. And the whole purpose is to ensure that the reforms are fully passed by that time, so that Basotho ba lokolohe and be able to go out to elections. If any of the issues are left behind, for instance, that require, for instance, a referendum, those can be done after the elections. So the parties have pledged to come back next week, Friday, to come and sign that pledge about committing to finalizing the reforms in Parliament, as well as holding elections.
Moseneke further expanded on issues pertaining to the LCD leader, Mr. Metsing.
There is an issue that is ongoing. It is receiving attention. It has received attention from me as representative of SADC, and it continues to receive attention. We met Dr. Metsing twice in this past week. So hasinto eri libetsing khebanwan. Kinto sebetsang ka yona and re buile le yena last week, and we have raised it with the government, so we are dealing with that matter.
Rapelang Khatebe, SABC News, Masego Lesotho.
That was the former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke, who's in Lesotho, rounding up the teams to try and get this final reforms done. Well, we're now joined by our correspondent who gave us those two reports, Rapelang Khatebe, who's in Lesotho. Rapelang, there's so much to unpack here, but let's start with the omnibus bill, the reform process. How far along are the parliamentarians and the Basotho leadership on that?
Dadendro, thank you very much, Dumela. Quite hands full, I suppose, for the retired justice there. I think a lot of very interesting work has been done when it comes to issues of reforms. It is always the final stages, the final push, that will always have some hurdles. Now, the bill itself, the omnibus bill, is now in Parliament, seized with Parliament. But now it is facing two issues. The body that is called the National Reforms Authority, its time has lapsed, and the Cabinet made a decision that it will probably not extend, which is something that I think that Moseneke will have to seize, because they are saying there is no guarantee that the Cabinet, or in fact the Parliament, can actually have a monitoring aspect that will make sure that it is handling the reforms process as it is, because they say once you leave politicians to do what Basotho wanted on their own, they are subject to go and change a lot of things. So when it comes to reforms, it is now at a stage where the Parliament needs now to decide on it, and it requires 2/3 majority. I think when you are listening to Ndate Mokhosi Tsidiso, who are saying if Ndate Metsing is not given safe passage to return to Lesotho, they might withdraw their votes. That means to get to that 2/3 majority that says the reforms process can now be turned into law, might be meeting some challenges. Now, this is the time when all politicians bring their little issues now as a hand to try and to get a little bit of quid pro quo at the time when everybody now is about to go to elections.
All right. Is the former Deputy Chief Justice, he sounds optimistic and hopeful, but it seems as if he's done quite a lot to bring the parties together. And obviously, as you say, this last hurdle could be the highest one for him. But does he see a way forward, especially with all these side issues?
It is not going to be the easiest, but remember, if you look at where they come from, where they started, where, even sitting together to agree on anything was near impossible. The reforms process alone took close to a year negotiating for a safe return of the former Lesotho Prime Minister, Tom Tabane, and a whole group of that had come to South Africa and were refusing to go back to Lesotho without a safe return. Now, the reforms process took place through the help of SADC, and it moved with quite a speed. The consultations, and to come up with that omnibus bill that encompasses about 7 thematic areas that refers to the elections. I think Lesotho has done what many countries take decades to achieve to that level. Now, we understand it may never be such a smooth process, but the question is how we can now balance and bring them to one table to make sure that what the National Reforms Authority has done does not go to waste or is not left to parliamentarians alone to oversee that its completion, because once it is seized with them and the parliamentarians alone, we know things can go south pretty quickly. So I think that balancing issue is what he needs to get the wisdom actually to bring all sides together such that hopefully before elections, this omnibus bill is passed.
All right, so there are a lot of side issues, and I just wonder if we look at maybe the LCD's leader, Mr. Metsing, and the demands that the party is making, is this a deal breaker? If Mr. Metsing is not allowed to return and participate in the election, that all will be lost?
Absolutely not. I don't think for a minute. But it is also the consequences that you may suffer if you let it slide like that. It's quite a complex history when it comes to Metsing, because remember, there was a deal that was signed. It was called a Clause 10 deal, which allowed him a safe passage for him and others to suspend all the charges such that he returns to Lesotho. They start with the reforms process. At that time, it was quite crucial to have all parties, all hands on deck, that the reforms process can start. But then the Clause 10 was challenged in court, and it said the 3 legs of government are independent, and the court procedures cannot be dictated by the parliamentarians as to which particular cases it should be investigating. It therefore said Mr. Metsing and his co-accused needs to go and face the treason charges. In fact, a warrant of arrest was then issued. This is when he skipped the country. Now, if you look at balance in terms of numbers alone, I think the process can proceed without him. But the question is, are you not now setting a tone whereby there will be a little corner that will still haunt you later on, simply because the issues of balancing what judiciary does versus what the politicians and SADC has dictated upon in order to say to them, let these charges be suspended until at least after elections. If there are charges that he needs to face, it should be after that. I think that is where the tricky balance actually comes. You can ignore him, but the question is whether you cannot now have to come and deal with the same issue post-elections, because Lesotho's problems are always after elections. It's a calm before the storm, but always comes after elections.
Justice Moseneke says that it's on his radar, the Mr. Metsing issue, but it sounds as if there's not much he can do if this separation of the arms of South Africa, of Lesotho governance are observed. He can't really interfere, can he?
It's a complicated, well, he's an experienced person, but I'm saying good luck to him. Convincing the police to suspend the warrant of arrest against Metsing. And the question is, are you not now setting a trend whereby people can say when the judges or the court, the judiciary passes a particular outcome, you can challenge it. Who else or what else are you going to bend over to? if those institutions, you can now start convincing them or swaying them around. It's a very delicate balance, and I'm saying good luck to him.
What about ordinary citizens on the ground? You know, a lot of horse trading discussions happen with people in parliament and these political parties, and the citizens really are concerned about bread and butter issues. How are they seeing this process unfold, and are they looking forward to the elections?
It's a brilliant question, because I think a lot of them, there's a lot of fatigue. They have gone through the reforms with a bit of energy, you know. They have seen them being outlined. They have dictated what they want. And for them, this little technicalities that the bill is now in Parliament, something, 2/3 majority, it becomes a bit tiresome. But you will understand now, because the elections are around the corner, everybody now starts to open up and to try to understand the issues that are at hand. And I think Lesotho just wants these reforms passed. They want to now start freely focusing on the upcoming elections. It would actually be excellent to go to elections with a fresh set of these reforms to see whether they can influence the outcomes. We have seen indications here and there of what we can start to reap benefits on what these reforms want. And I think we should not even deceive ourselves. It's going to be a long process for the country to say they have reached a stage whereby these reforms now are beginning to make an impact. It's a long journey, but I think it is now at a very critical stage whereby you need to manage the process properly such that it does not reach the parliament, such that where there are challenges, there is no oversight body that can perform the functions of what NRA was doing. You risk a chance of losing all the gains that you have made, hard gains over the 2 years, and the, I think, hard dedication that SADC showed in supporting this particular process. So I think that balance as to what kind of transition mechanism will you put in place such that when this National Reforms Authority's time ends, you have a body that can actually be looking over that process is implemented as the people have actually dictated. Otherwise, leaving parliamentarians alone to deal with these reforms is a big risk.
It sounds as if not everything can possibly be done in time, but is there an understanding that whatever's left over shouldn't be of such a material nature that it can be dealt with post the elections?
Absolutely, you're right. If you listen carefully to what Moseneke says, he says, let these key critical parameters that needs to be worked upon, let them be passed such that we go to elections with those basic pillars. Now, you need experts to actually now decode, I think it's close to 700 pages of that omnibus bill, to now sift thoroughly and say, what do we need that can help us cross this particular bridge? What is it that we can afford to now concentrate on behind the post-elections? Because at the same time, if you try and do everything all at the same time, you might end up with a soup that you might not be able to drink afterwards. So I think you need contributions from all sectors to actually be serious, because politicians tend to have the mentality that they will be in power forever, only to their surprise that after elections, most of them, when they can no longer go back to parliament, they start to see the importance of why these reforms need to have taken place. There's a lot of things that will affect negatively for those who believe they will be in power, only to be shocked or be surprised that they become now ordinary citizens who now need those reforms much more than before.
All right, Rabelang, we're going to leave it there. I'm sure that this is a story that will continue to unfold as we get closer and closer to those elections. I look forward to our fireside chats in the weeks to come.
Let's just Let's just say Lesotho is going to get a little bit more justice.
Absolutely. Thanks so much indeed. Ke a leboga.